Thank you, Ray. So I'm going to try and do a whistle-stop tour. So Kargo is a mobile company, so this is all going to be about mobile. I was here for a little while yesterday morning, so there is some repetition, but I didn't see many of these faces yesterday morning, so we might be all right. So the question I was asked to answer is, can a programmatic approach dedicated to premium publishers be the key to revenue growth? So I like a simple, I think, the answer, and I said yes and no, and then I thought I can go and sit down and then I can enjoy the rest of the panelists. But I thought you might like to know why I think the answer is unfortunately yes and no, and it's primarily based on the fact that Kargo works with premium editorial-based publishers, some of whom are in the room today. So why yes? Well, actually, this is a stat, this is a ComScore stat from the UK, literally for this month. So that's Google's reach. These are smartphones. Remember, I said mobile. So these are smartphone unique views for Google, Facebook, Facebook, Kargo, Twitter, and AOL. And as you'll see, we only work with premium editorial places. So that's broadcasters, newspaper groups, magazine publishing houses, and what we call digital-first companies. Digital-first companies for us are quite specific. They have to have an editor-in-chief and have professional journalists that they actually curate and create the stories. So it's a very specific, what is often described as premium. But there is scale. There's scale to take on the two companies that actually take 85 cents in the dollar. Actually, it's close to 65 pence in the UK, if you care to know, but it's 85 cents in the US. So there's scale here, and this is mobile web inventory. So that's the easy part. There's inventory, it's at scale, but it actually comes from all of the publishers, or at least a good, healthy section of them. But what happens if you're an individual? So the reason I said no is because I think there's a big part of the ecosystem that's actually being missed. So I think it's fair to say that programmatic piping infrastructure is actually complex. I think Ray just pointed that out, and Gareth, I think you pointed that out too. The pipes are not necessarily set up to deliver quality advertising to premium publishers, unless it's on a desktop, and I'll explain that in a minute. The systems, programmatic systems, are actually looking for something unique. The data has to be unique. The DSPs are searching for unique data. So if you don't have that, they're actually not bidding or responding to you. The majority of digital publishers' consumption is now coming from smartphones. At least the lion's share of AOP members are now seeing a majority coming from smartphones rather than the desktop. But unfortunately, smartphones across the board do not provide the same abilities to match those bids as the desktop does. I'm sure, show of hands, cookie syncing mean anything to anyone in the room? Okay, a good number at least anyway. The desktop does that well. There are lots more ways that that cookie can be synced, and therefore one request, one response, one match, therefore money flows. Unfortunately, mobile doesn't allow that, and when most of the consumption is now coming from mobile, or at least the lion's share, that means that you're losing a lot, and in some cases the DSPs, and therefore the trading desks, actually ignore one whole chunk of the mobile ecosystem, and that's the iOS system. So it passes over that in a hurry, and not all, but the vast majority of DSPs do not call out those impressions. So that's dangerous, and that's why I said no, because you're missing out as publishers on that opportunity. So there's a fault in the system, and I'm not going to give you the absolute answer here today, but I'll give you some suggestions. I think it's still true. I spend a lot of time with brand advertisers, the CMOs, and I was with 10 in one specific place only 10 days ago, and they want premium environments to place their brands against. Now, Ray kindly pointed out that I've been doing this for a while, and that's exactly the same story that I heard in 1991 when I started. So, but I was in magazines then. They came to Top Gear to buy car ads against those editorial pieces, and they came to Marie Claire to do exactly the same, and then I worked in TV, it was exactly the same, and we did that to start with in digital as well, and now that's gotten a little lost along the way, but brands still want those safe environments to advertise against. Programmatic system, and if we can solve that, then premium publishers will win again. Programmatic systems can find audiences on desktop, which is how I described it. So you're owned and operated. If someone goes to your site directly, that can be found. It also can be found on a mobile application because the identity that the user passes or that app passes also allows for programmatic. I haven't been here for a couple of hours today, but how many people are actually publishers in the room? Can I just have a show of hands? Great, because that's about 100% more than were here yesterday morning. So I will ask that group, and it's kind of rhetorical. I think I maybe know the answer, but how many of those people that just raised their hand have managed to make an app that delivers at scale in the same way that their mobile web impressions do? All right, okay. That's why I answered no to start with, because that's a problem. If your inventory is coming from the mobile web and not the app, then that means that cookie sync is going to pass you by, and therefore those impressions are not necessarily going to be bid on quite as healthily, and that's impressions that you can't monetize. So there is a fault in the system. You've seen charts like this before, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go a little bit nerdy in a second, but so prepared, this is not nerdy. But basically, the idea here is that we started with TV. It was a one-on-one transaction. We went to the desktop. Although there are different browsers, it's still pretty much a one-on-one transaction. There are no different operating systems fundamentally underpinning that system. Then mobile and tablet came along, and you started to fragment. Now, as a publisher, you have the decision whether to make an app on iOS, an app on Android, just create a HTML5 site. And then social publishing came along as well. So now people don't necessarily just come to your homepage any longer or via a search. Now they come through 5, 10, 15 different social platforms, depending on what audience and what age. That's a great opportunity, because if you're a publisher that used to be a news publisher, and I mean current affairs news, and in the old days they were coming to your site, then maybe your audience was 25 to 44 ABC One males. You'll show, my NRS age. Yeah. But now you put that same information on Snapchat, you've just increased your unique user base. Right? That's a good opportunity, but if you can't monetize them, then what do you do about that? And I think this pictorially hopefully describes, and I apologize if someone from CNN in the room, I just happened to choose CNN Money as my example. So on the very left-hand side is the CMS system. The editor or journalist puts in there, the images go in there. The second is how it gets posted to the CNN.com as their site. So that's the very first, that's the owned and operated as we know. But at that same time, that gets published socially across all of those platforms. Does everyone know that that's where you are when you're looking at that article? That you're actually in the mobile web when I'm looking at all of those pieces? I've just told you I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter and I'm on Google AMP, I'm on Apple Newsreader. But unless I'm actually only on the feed version of that article, the piece of the story that tantalizes me to go and read the article, that feed piece is in the app. But all of the other pages where that deep content is actually written, you're now on the mobile web. It's a mobile WebKit. I'm still in the Facebook app. I'm still in the Apple Newsreader app. To the consumer, I feel like I'm either in an app or it says CNN at the top of the page. But I'm actually in a web environment, and that's where those huge opportunities come. This is my 101. We hopefully all remember this. This is when life was simple. I'm a publisher. I've got an advertising sales team. I've got a CMS, my journalists put everything into that. The ad server tells us how many impressions, and the salespeople go sell it to an agency, and we're all good, and the money stays with the publisher. Fast forward a couple of years, and we made it a little bit more complicated. There was now more inventory. We needed potentially some other help to sell that, so ad networks were born. After the ad networks came the exchanges and the SSPs connected to the DSPs, and now you've got a whole bunch of people helping to support that ecosystem. If I fast forward to 2, 3, wherever you want to put that point in time when social publishing actually became interesting or at scale, this whole left-hand side, so my original CMS and ad server sits right in the middle here. Right in the middle here. This is what you had. On the whole left-hand side is now social publishing. Each one of those social publishing platforms has their own ecosystem. So that's Facebook, that's Google, that's Snapchat, that's Twitter, and I go on and on. Who sells that inventory? Some publishers do themselves, right? But the majority of the time that's sold by Facebook and Google and Snapchat. And publishers are allowed by the proxy of most of their contracts to be able to sell in that environment too. But do you know what has to happen? And I'm having this conversation with someone from a very large newspaper group in the UK. You have to use, in Apple's case, Workbench to push those ads through there, which is a different operating system than the Google system, which is a different operating system than the Facebook Audience Network. So that's really hard, and that's now means that you've now divided and conquered almost, depending on the size and scale, 60 to 80% of your audience, because that's coming from those social environments these days. So if I were to show you the Lumascape, and you've all seen one of those ugly diagrams, right? What does the Lumascape serve? Well, it actually only serves the right-hand side. The Lumascape does not serve the left-hand side. So 300, 1,000, however many companies are on the Lumascape these days, serve that 15% if you're in the US, or 35 pence if you're in the UK. Because they serve this world where it's all connected to the ad server, and they do not serve the other side. There's an opportunity there. I said we haven't solved it yet, Kargo or any individual publisher, but there is a huge opportunity. But it has to be collaboration to do that. There has to be some collaboration because scale comes, and this is kind of where we sit. So we actually are working with a lot of premium publishers, some of whom, as I say, are in this room. And the answer is that it's not all programmatic. So this side, yes, it's programmatic. We work with them. We flow money through singular deal IDs at scale to give publishers their true piece of money from the right-hand side of the equation. What we also do is we solve the left-hand side by taking all of those individual operating systems and making a layer that allows us to publish with the publisher. The publisher controls the revenue through those social platforms. So you're now starting to take money out of both equations and control the money. I like receiving checks. I'm sure that you all do as well. I like seeing money deposited in my bank account. Most of the time, though, the taxman kind of likes me to know why that money gets deposited into my bank account and for what reason and how much did I have to do to get it. I think there are lots of checks being given to publishers and Excel spreadsheets at the end of each month that say, this is how many impressions you had on my social environment, and this is your check. That's not a great negotiating position for the future, because if I control that check, I also control the negotiation, one would imagine. And I apologize because I work with Google and Facebook every minute of every day as well. But there has to be choice, because if I go back to the point I made about brand advertisers, they want premium environments where their brands are safe. They like Facebook for that, and they like Google for that too, because they like scale, they like ease of purchase, and they like results. Collectively, the publishing communities in each of the markets, and I work internationally, so have to think about how they can pull those resources to make those things become easier. And ease of access, ease of buying, data is part of that, of course, but actually that's fundamentally key, because that's where the money flow actually comes from. If we give someone the ability, and I think Gareth touched on this, 22 different buyers, when one would be more helpful, or at least a smaller number than 20, they will buy at scale. I'll leave you with this. There's been a lot of talk about cross-screen, and I actually used to run one of the largest video cross-screen companies until a few months ago. I'm a mobile evangelist. I started in mobile in 2002 for my sins. And I thought mobile was the future. Unfortunately, I was just a little early, and I had to go away and come back to it. And then cross-screen. But the truth is that in 2002, the reason I tell you that is because in 2002, mobile made up 3% of anyone's impressions. And everyone said, why the hell should we care about the 3%? And then it got to 10, and then it got to 20. And at 20s, I also was still getting, who cares about it? Well, fundamentally, I'm hearing from large publishers that 80% of the traffic is coming from mobile web. So my response to that in many cases is, who the hell cares about desktop anymore? Because actually, if the future is actually solving the mobile, cross-mobile problem, then actually more time and attention should be spent on that than it is keep on feeding a beast, which is actually in decline. I'm not saying desktop's gone away. I mean, we all use our laptops for a variety of different things. But mobile and this whole ecosystem, 15%, that's the kind of average of a premium publisher in the US right now, is coming from desktop. And that's where the money's coming from. If you can solve the other piece, then actually there's a revenue flow opportunity. That's all I had time for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Just one thing comes to mind. You used a really graphic phrase there about handing over checks to publishers, and here's your number of impressions. Are you starting to sense that publishers are starting to show some kickback from what may be a partially one-sided relationship?
Yeah, most definitely. I think the one thing that the industry knows full well is that the social platforms, and I'm not picking on any of them, they are not editorial creators. The content creation comes from the people in this room, and they are environments for that to live and to grow. So that's a great thing if there's a balance, and I think most industries have had to find a balance over time, not just the media, of how to work together. Because there is a point where if you cannot keep creating, then you cannot keep growing that environment, that walled garden as well. Because actually there's another stat that I didn't share, but the vast majority of actually what's being consumed in social environments now is editorial content. It's not pictures of my children or my grandparents. They're skimmed. They're not consumed. There's a difference between feed and read, a very big difference. I'll happily show you. There's a study done. If anyone chooses, they can come and ask me, and I'll show you the feed versus read study. People do not look at advertising at any great scale, apart from performance advertisers in a feed environment, when they're reading, just like they did when they were reading magazines and newspapers 100+ years ago. They are engaged, and therefore they respond better to brands. So this is a brand environment, and I will make that point. This isn't a performance environment. There's no doubt the feed is a very fundamentally fantastic point for a performance environment. But I think, yes.
This is a revolutionary thought. People engaging rather than momentary skims is different for absorption of advertising. That's a good one.
Scary, eh?
I know. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.